Lewis Hamilton has just delivered his worst Qatar performance since joining Ferrari, and Frederic Vasseur is running out of patience after seeing the SF25 collapse in a sprint that exposed every weakness the team has tried to hide this season. The internal report confirms Hamilton finished 17th, more than 46 seconds behind Oscar Piastri after being forced to start from the pit lane when Ferrari broke park firm with a desperate overnight setup change. The radio messages reveal a driver who has shifted from frustration to empty resignation, telling the team the car will not go any faster, and later answering questions with sarcasm that stunned the garage. Before we reveal why Vasseur is furious and what this means for Hamilton's Sunday, make sure you subscribe right now, because Qatar has exposed Ferrari in a way that changes everything for the final races. The sprint confirmed that Hamilton's weekend was broken before the race even began. On Friday, he selected a high downforce rear wing, hoping to stabilize the SF25 through the fast corners of Lusail. Instead, the car became slower on the straights and remained unstable in the long radius sections. This combination destroyed his one-lap potential and sent him out in SQ1 with an 18th place result. Ferrari panicked overnight. The engineers switched to a lower downforce rear wing and changed suspension stiffness in a final attempt to eliminate the subvirage dominating Hamilton's Sector 2 performance. These changes broke park firm because Ferrari used parts of a different specification. As a result, Hamilton was forced to start from the pit lane, and the sprint transformed from a scoring opportunity into a live test session. Even with clean air in the opening laps, Hamilton could not reach the pace of the midfield cars. The internal GPS analysis shows the Ferrari remained one of the slowest machines in the grid in the 150 to 200 km/h corners. These corners compose the DNA of Lusail, and Hamilton lost time in each one of them. The SF25 simply refused to carry momentum, and Hamilton found himself trapped in a rhythm he could not break. As the sprint progressed, Hamilton overtook only the other pit lane starters, but was never close to troubling the Williams or Haas cars that led the midfield chase. Ferrari engineers described the sprint as mediocre at best, confirming that the car lacked both aerodynamic stability and mechanical grip. Even with a cleaner balance than Friday, the SF25 behaved like the 6th or 7th fastest car on track. The radio communication is where the full scale of Hamilton's frustration becomes clear. On Friday, Hamilton said the car will not go any faster, a statement that stunned the Ferrari garage. During the sprint, the radio was nearly silent. Hamilton no longer believed feedback would change anything because the root problem was structural. When asked after the race if anything felt positive, he replied, "The weather is nice," a sarcastic answer that reflected total resignation. Charles Leclerc's race confirmed that Ferrari's Qatar collapse was not isolated to Hamilton. Leclerc started 9th, but ran wide into turn 2 and fell to 13th. He spent the entire sprint trapped in AD, or S-train, unable to pass slower cars from Haas and Sauber. The comparison proves the SF25 lacks both the top speed and the aerodynamic consistency required to race effectively at Lusail. For Hamilton, the sprint leaves him with a near impossible task for Sunday. The only advantage is that Ferrari at least validated the lower downforce setup. The problem is simple but devastating. Even with the corrected configuration, the SF25 is nowhere near the points on pure pace. Ferrari now needs a chaotic race with safety cars or retirements ahead. Otherwise, Hamilton faces another painful result in what has become his most difficult weekend in a Ferrari so far. Ferrari entered the Qatar sprint facing a structural performance deficit because the SF25 simply did not match the demands of the circuit. The layout punishes any car that lacks stability in long high-speed corners, and the leaked data shows that Hamilton's configuration offered neither rotation nor aerodynamic consistency. The high downforce setup chosen on Friday created excessive drag while failing to generate the grip he needed through the fast sweepers of Sector 2. This left Hamilton with a car that felt slow on the straights and heavy in the corners, a combination that destroyed his qualifying effort and ensured the sprint began from a position of vulnerability. The attempt to fix the problem overnight introduced the second layer of the crisis. Ferrari's engineers tried to recover performance by lowering the rear wing load and adjusting suspension stiffness to correct the chronic understeer that had dominated Hamilton's laps. The decision was bold but also desperate because the changes violated park firm regulations. This automatically forced Hamilton to start from the pit lane and eliminated any chance of using grid position to compensate for the car's weaknesses. The sprint became a test session instead of a competitive race before Hamilton even left the garage. Once Hamilton began his run from the pit lane, the true scale of the problem emerged. With open track ahead, he should have demonstrated the raw pace buried inside the new configuration, but the internal analysis revealed that the SF-25 remained unable to generate speed in the 150 to 200 km/h corners that define Lusail. Hamilton could not carry the required minimum speed and therefore lost momentum before entering the straights. This trapped him in a negative cycle where every corner exit left him a step behind the midfield group he needed to catch. The situation worsened as Hamilton reached traffic. Without pit stops or tire strategy in a sprint, overtaking requires strong top speed or aerodynamic efficiency. Ferrari had neither. The SF-25 lacked the straight-line power to approach competitors before braking zones and lacked the stability to remain close enough in dirty air to activate DRS effectively. The leaked report shows Hamilton often closed in at corner entry but immediately lost traction mid-corner, making any attempt to launch an attack impossible. The sprint turned into a static procession because the Ferrari simply could not race. The radio communication revealed the psychological impact of the problem. Hamilton's message on Friday that the car will not go any faster marked a clear shift in attitude. During the sprint, he offered almost no technical feedback because he believed the SF-25 was incapable of meaningful improvement. He answered with short acknowledgments and even sarcasm, expressing a quiet but unmistakable admission that his tools were not competitive. When a driver stops giving detailed feedback, it reflects a loss of trust in the machinery, and in Qatar that loss was obvious. Charles Leclerc's collapse confirmed the issue was systemic rather than isolated. Leclerc started ninth, a position that should have allowed Ferrari to defend the upper midfield, yet he ran wide in turn 2 and immediately fell into a DRS train he could never escape. His pace deteriorated as the tires overheated behind slower cars, and the lack of straight-line efficiency removed any overtaking opportunities. Hamilton and Leclerc produced different styles of struggle, but the data behind both performances aligned perfectly. The SF-25 lacked the aerodynamic purity and top speed required to compete. The final expression of the problem is the strategic outlook for Sunday. Hamilton's 17th place finish delivered no competitive benefit and confirmed that the sprint setup, even after force corrections, left Ferrari as one of the weakest teams in Qatar. The engineers gained limited information, and Hamilton now depends entirely on external events such as safety cars to have any chance at scoring points. With rivals finding rhythm and Ferrari falling backward, Hamilton enters the Grand Prix weekend facing a challenge that goes beyond setup or execution. The problem lies in the foundation of the car itself. Ferrari's engineering team entered the sprint under significant internal pressure because the overnight decision to abandon the original configuration left them with a car that had not completed a single representative lap before race conditions. The move from a high downforce wing to a lower drag specification required recalculating balance, load distribution, and mechanical stiffness without any on-track validation. Engineers had to rely entirely on simulation data and incomplete readings from Friday. Every adjustment carried risk, and because part firm had already been broken, the team understood they were locked into a configuration that might not respond once Hamilton pushed at sprint intensity. The aerodynamic challenge became the dominant engineering concern. Lusail demands a stable platform capable of sustaining long periods of lateral load, and the SF-25 was already struggling in this area before the changes. The reduced rear wing load aimed to give Hamilton more rotation and reduce the drag deficit exposed in qualifying, yet the internal analysis shows this shift created a new imbalance. The floor did not generate consistent load, especially through the fast transitions of Sector 2. Engineers saw Hamilton fighting the car to maintain grip even with open track, revealing that the aerodynamic mapping remained inconsistent and that the structural limitations could not be masked with simple adjustments. The decision to modify suspension stiffness added another layer of complexity. Engineers attempted to reintroduce front bite by altering mechanical support, hoping it would compensate for the aerodynamic inconsistency. However, the leaked report shows that the SF-25 struggled to synchronize mechanical grip with aerodynamic load. As the tires reached higher temperatures, the chassis became increasingly unstable in mid-corner, forcing Hamilton to reduce entry speed to keep the rear controllable. This mismatch between mechanical and aero behavior meant Ferrari lacked a baseline from which to optimize performance during the sprint itself. Starting from the pit lane also altered Ferrari's engineering approach. With no opportunity to adjust the car further, engineers repurposed the sprint into a data-gathering mission. They monitored tire temperatures, aerodynamic load patterns, and power unit thermal cycles in real time while instructing Hamilton to maintain consistent laps. The team hoped that clean air would reveal predictable behavior, but the analysis showed the SF25 refused to settle into a stable rhythm. Hamilton's sector times fluctuated beyond Ferrari's acceptable variance range, indicating that the car still lacked the baseline stability needed for Sunday. Communication between Hamilton and the engineering wall added another dimension of pressure. Hamilton's feedback was uncharacteristically limited, consisting mostly of short acknowledgments. Engineers repeatedly requested detail on balance evolution, traction phases, and corner entry behavior, yet the driver responded with minimal commentary, a clear sign that the car was not offering him a consistent platform to analyze. This forced the team to rely on raw telemetry alone, complicating their efforts to diagnose specific phases where performance collapsed. The absence of driver-led refinement left Ferrari without the layered insight usually essential in sprint conditions. The comparison with Leclerc's telemetry intensified the engineering concerns. Leclerc, despite starting far ahead, experienced the same stability problems once he ran wide in turn 2 and became trapped in a DRS line. His data revealed identical patterns of front grip loss, inconsistent rotation, and excessive drag when attempting to close on slower cars. Engineers realized that the issue was not isolated to Hamilton's configuration, but embedded in the architecture of the SF25. This reinforced the internal conclusion that the sprint result was not an anomaly, but a symptom of a deeper aerodynamic and mechanical misalignment that could not be corrected within the weekend. The final engineering challenge emerged during the post-sprint briefing. Engineers had to determine whether to maintain the compromised setup or pursue additional changes ahead of Sunday. Both options carried consequences. Maintaining the sprint configuration guaranteed predictability, but trapped Hamilton in a car that lacked competitive pace. Introducing further changes risked another pit lane start and additional instability. With limited usable data and a car unable to produce consistent performance, the engineering group now faces a decision that will define Hamilton's entire Qatar weekend. The pressure on Ferrari has rarely been higher because every path forward carries significant competitive risk.